Hello and welcome back to Games Week Pro Experience here from Berlin. And now it's going to be really, really interesting because I have the man here with me who knows a lot about Games Week. Finally, someone who's an expert and can explain what's happening here, actually. Micha,
what's happening?
Welcome.
That's a very good question. Hi, Markus, by the way. I haven't seen each other in real life for a while, only through the screens, and that's all what's happening. Actually at Games Week Berlin the whole time. So just quickly, I'm CEO and founder of Booster Space. I invented Games Week Berlin and run it ever since. And this time we decided to go all online with Twitch here, with Discord there, with Zoom workshops left and right, with now also in parallel there's a roundtable on tabletop games running on Discord for all ticket holders, with the New York team from Kickstarter and 2 cases. They will talk in parallel while we are talking here more like casually about the fun parts. They are talking business on tabletop games. So this will be interesting, which means every now and then I might need to pick up the phone because they are also triggering me here, and we are trying to build a bridge to their roundtable. So if you see in the chat, KSR is the code. For Kickstarter, then we know it's coming out of the roundtable, and we'll see how it works. It's an experiment for us, as many things of Games Week Berlin Pro Experience 2020 are.
Yeah. For you as head of Games Week, how was the experience so far of the online Games Week for the first time?
Yeah, there's things you just, like I said yesterday, no, yesterday doesn't make sense, but just before the event started, I said, the weird thing is I just don't know what can go wrong because I don't have the experience. Like usually I know, okay, printing stuff is late, the guy doesn't find the delivery entrance, traffic jams, flights cancelled, whatever. We're used to that. But we're not used to what happened yesterday already and what I think is happening now. Speakers from the UK are 1 hour ahead of our time, and then we now just had live daylight saving time changing in Germany. So there's a new shift in time zones, and people are not in the same space-time continuum as they usually are at events. So these things we didn't really think about. Also yesterday it happened twice, actually. One Jupiter for the Dev Booster jury session, and even our keynote speaker, Richard Bartle, who was talking about why video game designers are gods, mixed it up with the time zones. So even like veterans of, in the industry, for Richard Bartle, I think for 50 years or something, it's unforeseen things that are happening.
Unforeseen incidents.
Unforeseen incidents, like a famous video game, right?
yeah, right. So there's a lot going on beside this stream we all know about.
Yes.
What's your personal highlight so far?
My personal highlight, I really liked a lot the opening event. That was fun. Like it's always cool to have Melek Balgün in Berlin. And this is a fun bridge also, with NRW, Cologne. You're from Essen, which is near Cologne, but in the same zone for us. We just say that's NRW, North Rhine-Westphalia. But this is cool. I really like this, that we have this bridge between these 2 hotspots of the German industry working together, making this happen in Berlin, plus people from around the world chiming in. We have also in parallel, it's funny, because before I came here, I sit here because I also represent Kickstarter in Europe as Outreach Games. And Pontus, one of our speakers, he works for Global Top Round, and I was with him running a game financing masterclass for 2 hours on Zoom, supported by Projekt Zukunft Berlin. And while we were talking, in parallel, we had our Discord group with the Koreans online, who just now launched their Kickstarter campaign for Chronosword. And 5 minutes before they launched, the video was still not uploaded. And we were like, hey, change this, do that. In parallel, preparing this. In parallel, talking with the Kickstarter guys for the Discord and talking with our team what we will do next. And then the pizza arrived at the same time. And that's the fun experiences. That's why we do events, actually, is because these unforeseen incidents happen. And now they're just different.
Yeah.
But same fun.
All new experiences.
Yeah.
Great. So our guests are ready, and
Cool.
we get to speak about tabletop and video game design right now. We have 3 amazing guests with us. Welcome, Thomas, Adrian, and Krzysztof. Hi.
Hello.
Hey, cool. Long time no see,
Hello,
friends.
everybody.
So let's start with a quick introduction round of everyone. Adrian, would you like to start?
So, do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Adrian Dinu. So I'm a board game designer. It's very strange when I'm listening to my echo, but yeah, I have to deal with this. So yes, I have designed multiple board games. As you know very well, when you are a game designer, not all your creations are reaching the public tabletop. So yeah, recently we have done a Kickstarter with Northgard, Uncharted Lands, which is a board game, a 4X game that follows and is inspired from the universe of the Northgard video game. So that will be the topic today. Yeah, I don't know how many details you would like to know.
Yeah, we will hear more details later, I think.
Yeah,
Thomas,
sure.
would you like to go next?
I can go next. Yeah, sure. So you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So I'm Thomas Bidaux. I run a company called ICO Partners. I also have a separate company called the Crowdfunding Agency that help people put together crowdfunding campaigns. And I work a lot on crowdfunding for video games and tabletop games. And on today's topic, so I work with Adrian on the Northgard campaign, but I also work on the campaign for Reigns the Council, which is a board game adaptation for the Reigns video game based on the and Reigns of Majesty, the mobile swipe right to say yes, swipe left to say no narrative games. And yeah, and I'm in general I work with lots of different games, and I've had that weird situation where I have a foot in the tabletop side and a foot into the video game side, and so probably feed into that direction.
So good to have you with us. And Krzysztof.
Hi, I'm Chris, and I run Monster Couch. I do a little bit of code, marketing, and business. We've recently launched Wingspan, but we also help other indies bring their games to consoles, and that's like the majority of our business. But yeah, happy to be here, and definitely looking forward to working on more board games.
Awesome. I think Adrian has a small kickoff presentation for us. Is that right?
Yes, I have. But the question is how much in detail you want to go, because in fact, what I made a presentation where I talk a little bit about the mechanisms of the game, and I matched a little bit what happens in the video game, what happens on the board game. I'm not sure at what detail level you want to go. If you want just to go on the surface, or you want to see a little bit more on the details.
If you can,
that's something that I don't know.
If you can give us a 5-minute kickoff of the topic.
Okay, so I will share my screen then.
It's already shared. We can see it.
Yeah. And I have to make it like this. Okay. So, in fact, what you see here is on the left side is just some random print screen from the Northgard. video game. And on the right side, you just see a print screen of the Uncharted Lands, so the adaptation to the board game in the Tabletopia implementation. Okay, so I don't know, for people who don't know yet what Northgard is, maybe I have a very short introduction. So Northgard is a strategy game based on Norse mythology, in which you control a clan of Vikings, you know. So you are, it's most like, if you know the Settlers game, or Age of Empires, or is most known in the video games RTS area. But here, this one is more close to the Settlers game, because it is focusing on gaining controls of territories and pieces of territories, and slowly gaining more control on the map, having some resource management. And it's a slow-paced game. It's not like in Age of Empires, where you have a lot of armies and you go once against the other, and then a small tech tree and things like this. It's more like focusing on building slowly your progress into the game by gaining control of territories, colonizing them one by one. So already from this point, you can see similarities with the board games, where you can see an adaptation which is possible in this territory control, and with a slow pace, you just go from one to the other, gain more control, have some skirmish fights with the opponents or the environment. The environment is quite harsh in this game, so you have to really play a lot in order to win your first game, and it has a quite steep learning curve. It's not just an easy game. That's why I want to focus on. On the other side, so we have the board game. I don't read through the whole pitch here, but what is important to understand is that we have, so the Vikings, you have the explore element, you have the building of your clan, you will build different buildings, you will develop through gaining the territory control, you will have to deal with some creatures coming and to interfere with your plans. You will have to fight in different skirmish fights through between the clans. You will have this harsh winter element also. So that's really in few words. Now we can see that I just took the main broad mechanisms, like we have in the board game, we have the card driven, we have the deck building element, we have modular boards, we have tile placement. We have variable player powers for the clans, because in the video game you have different clans having their own variable player power. We have dice rolling, we have many elements, but the most important is that this is a 4X game that can be played in a shorter time than a typical 4X game. And that was really our aim, to realize a 4X game that you can bring to the table and then finish a game in one hour. When you would play in two players, or three, let's say, 50 minutes, 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, or if you go beyond that, it goes to 1 hour and a half or so. But really our goal was to have really easy access to play this game and not follow really like a Twilight Imperium type of game, Okay, so that being said, a short disclaimer. So I have realized this game, or a prototype of this game, was already in very good shape, a major shape, when we first met the people from Northgard, from Shiro Games. And then we had to marry both universes together, which means I had already elements that were quite major in the gameplay experience, but then we had to marry them both together. And that was a process of almost 2 years of game evolution from that point onwards. Now, these are just some print screens of the game. So I wanted to say that the most important decision that we had to take was this target weight of the game, meaning what is really the time duration that we want to reach, what is the rule complexity. I don't want to go through 30 pages rules and with 3.A, 3.B, what happens, and so on, all the details of combat and things like this. What is the target public? As I just mentioned, we wanted to reach a little bit more public and not just focus on hardcore gamers. Now we understand that usually people that are playing Northgard, they like this challenge of resource management game, slow pace, a lot of decision points. So we understand that this is not just any Lambda player, that's for sure, but we want to open a little bit more to the public. So right now here I will, you can stop me whenever you want. I can go through. I have various pages here explaining what are the different takes on the elements from the game, but I can do it later on in more detail if you'd like.
Okay,
and this
Adrian,
would be like the first 5 minutes.
Adrian, I would say we go into the discussion now, and if you during the discussion have any points that you think are in your slides, we can maybe get back to them, but if not, we'll just see how it goes.
Yes.
I have a question already.
Yeah.
Adrian, that was super interesting. I always wonder, how do you manage as designer, as rule designer, basically, in the end of a tabletop game, get rid of the computer? Especially if you take a strategy game, you usually have something happens here, and then there's an effect there, right? And in between, the computer processes. Plus all the memory for the point system, the leveling, whatever, the experiences. How do you reflect that in a tabletop game without a computer?
So basically all this is explained in these slides that follow. Let's pick one of them. Let's pick the first one. So during your game in Northgard, you take a lot of decisions. So you will say, okay, I want to develop into this direction. I want to advance on this technology. I want to choose that path to victory. I want to explore, and that in that area, I want to be more focused on exploring. I want to be more focused on combat and so on. So all these elements are here symbolized by your deck of cards. So everybody starts with the deck of basic actions. Which are recruit, build, move, that can trigger combats and exploration. And these feast cards are just some joker, like any basic action of these 4 base actions. And that's the ground that you have as a clan. Plus a special card that is really unique to you, which is the clan card, which goes to this direction of having a variable player power. But what I want to say here is that your deck will represent your decision through the game, because there will be some development cards coming into the system, and you will pick from these development cards to integrate to your deck and follow on. This game will come here and there. You will play them 3 times, maybe 4 times in a game or so. Some you will play more, some you will play less, but this will be really representing your choices through the game. Now, how do you get rid of all these, what you say, calculations from the computer? Now, of course, when you speak about player-to-player interaction, that's quite easy. You have to get rid of some complexity. You have to represent the things in a simplified way in your game. You have to really keep in mind what is your interest, what is your duration of the game, how easy you want to progress, and how fast you want to progress through the game. What I call the game pacing. how many resources you will use. Of course, I have dropped quite some resources from Northgard. I didn't use all of them because I wanted to really focus on game progressing and having a rhythm where you don't just slowly build your territories, but rather advance quickly. And reducing the number of buildings that you want to have, and so on. So when it comes to a player-to-player interaction, it's quite, let's say, easy, I would say, because you really have to reduce the complexity, but really keep the main elements. So you have to keep the focus on the main feeling of the game. What is he really providing to you this play while playing in a video game? What do you have the same kind of feeling? I want to expand here. I want to conquest this area. I want to gain more resources on this side, and so on. But on the other side, you have the nature element, which is symbolized by the creatures. So here, how I got rid of the, let's say, complexity of the computer is that, in fact, I implemented a priority system, and these creatures they have their own phase through the game, and they can come and choose, following some of their priorities, they will choose to target one or the other players. As you as a player, you can deal with this and can anticipate some of the moves and can do something about it.
Okay, Adrian.
Yes.
I appreciate your enthusiasm. It's really, really great. You have a lot to say about the topic, obviously, but I want to include the others as well. Thomas, can you tell, from your point of view, what's the biggest difference in designing and creating board games and video games?
The humans, I guess. Even though you have board games that are like single player, where you play against the system, you need to account for the fact that you play with humans around the table when you play a tabletop game. Whereas even if you have a multiplayer game like maybe Northgard, you have in between you that machine that arbitrates for you. Whereas there's like social contract that goes into tabletop game that you need to account for. And sometimes it means like more complexity that's possible for humans because of the nature of what we are. And sometimes it means like less complexity because of that kind of like burden of knowledge that you have you impart into the players. So for instance, if you have like a board game that's incredibly complex with lots of mechanisms and discrete things that you need to remember, it's probably going to be, if it's depending on the kind of game, it could be a bad game design because people don't want to remember all of that, right? Because then they forget the rules and then you need to, I forgot to do this, I forgot to do that around the table. That's very bad. On the other side, because you're humans, you can also take advantage of that and the diplomatic relationship with people and open people to basically just chat with each other and make the game experience better for them. I'll give you an example with the adaptation of Reigns from video game to tabletop game, right? Reigns has a very strong narrative component, and that's like tons of lines of dialogues and discussions with your advisors, all that. The board game on the other side was just improvise the story. It becomes a little bit like a storytelling game, and that makes it very easy because we're very good at telling stories. So each card on the game has little prompts on that, and then here you go, you do a story. So I think it's important to leverage what's strong. I will play your strengths, and I think on tabletop it's the humans. On the PC or the computer, computational power of the machine is where you can put like lots of systems, hide them, and make the experience very rich because of that. And so I think both medium needs to take advantage of what makes them strong and good, rather than try to emulate the other side's strong point because they will never be as good.
Chris, as a developer of local co-op games, what do you say to what Thomas just said?
I think there are both mediums have their strengths, obviously, like the social interaction, but also in the pandemic times and people looking for ways to play board games online, I think it's this vector of going full circle. So, for example, a digital game going board game, and then the board game going digital because people can no longer meet and play, but still want those slower pace, maybe a little bit chill out. A lot of the time, a board game is just a reason for people to meet and talk and have some. This is just an engine for social interaction. And now we are, because of COVID, we are moving those online. So we, with just looking at how people, respond to Wingspan that we've launched last month. We see a lot of people coming in and bringing over their friends that they used to play, they used to meet, and now they can meet online and still, go playing. I'd be interesting how those. Thomas mentioned the board game reigns can have more, social interactions, and how could that look in a digital format? So, what if we've taken the reins, the board game, into the digital? Can those interactions still work when we are, just sitting not around the table, but around a virtual table?
Absolutely, that'd be very good. So, the reins, to explain very briefly, the way the board game works is that when the video game you play the king or the queen and you make decisions, right? In the board game, one player is the monarch, wears the crown, is queen or king. All the others are your advisors, and so they all want basically you to die, but only die at a certain time when your kingdom is in a certain position, right? Whether they want a very strong church, they want a strong military. Basically, they all kind of like play against the monarch, but also play against each other. So it creates like very interesting dynamics. And a lot of the fun comes from that storytelling element and improvising stories and making up stuff for that. Can that be done on the digital side? Yes, absolutely. And I think especially we've seen in 2020, people play a lot more board games through things like Tabletopia or Tabletop Simulator. And I would love to have a version of Reign's board game as, on a digital tabletop simulator, and people be able to play over Zoom or whatever other chat system they use, because it would work. There's no question about that. But then it's a question of like having a system that's elegant to make it easier for people to overcome that distance they have, where around the table you can say, oh, this thing works like that, and you point at the card and make it easy. Here you don't have that physical contact. So there's probably a few extra development where the computer can help on that front. And I think things going full circle is the best. No question about that.
Could I ask another noob question, sort of, on Kickstarter, especially when the direct marketing happens for tabletop games? They focus a lot on storyline, on immersion, on experiences, whereas as I play tabletop games, mostly it's just like focusing on the rules and I just want to win. If I'm building trains or like trading wheat, it's not a big difference for me in terms of immersion or storytelling. Would you say I'm completely wrong? You didn't understand tabletop games? It's all about immersion? Perhaps, who wants to take the answer?
I can take it.
There's a game for everyone.
Yeah. So my experience with tabletop games on Kickstarter is that it's a mix of the materials and the rules. And that immersion things is like, you want to have beautiful miniatures, you have beautiful box and nice cards and nice illustration, because you want to you buy an item and the quality of that item matters. But the other side of that is people care a lot about the rules. So when I work on a video game crowdfunding campaign, my number one advice is you need to have a demo of the game as much as possible. That's also true for tabletop game. More often than not now, you will have the rules posted as you launch. You will have videos of people reviewing the game and playing it. And it matters a lot. The tabletop fans are really, really peculiar about the game playing well for them. And not all of them. Some of them will be backing because they want the fancy miniatures because they're very pretty, and that they will maybe care less about the rules. But in the case of Northgard, where we work with Adrian, you can attest to that. People had lots of very small, minute questions about what's the power for that clan, how is the winter working, all this, and feedback to it, which was very positive. But when the Kickstarter campaign was launched, there was lots of questions. How does that game play? Because I'm not going to back it unless I know it's a game the kind of game I would like, right? And one trend we see at the moment is very relevant to that discussion is more and more games when they launch on Kickstarter will have a tabletop simulator or a Tabletopia version, a bit like what you used to have maybe print and play so people could try it. Now we're going more and more towards, and 2020 and people staying at home, probably one of the big reasons for that. You will have a digital version of that. And Adrian, maybe you should talk about how much you've used Tabletopia.
I have, but I didn't, I think the advantage of a full digital adaptations is that you don't have to struggle with the engine, and you can focus on enjoying the game. And I don't think the physical simulators achieve the fun goal, really.
They are just easier to put together.
Sorry?
They're easier and quicker to put together for people who don't know how to make games.
That's definitely true, but from a customer perspective rather than from a developer perspective, I'm not. I wouldn't meet with my friends to play a table, like a physical simulator version of a board game, because there's so many better video games than that. And still, I do meet. Recently, for example, Root launched a beautiful digital adaptation, and I go and meet online with my friends and we play it, and it's a great experience. But it's it takes away a lot of the hassle of taking care of the board, and you can just focus on your strategy and having fun with your friends.
Adrian, in the comparison between making the board game and the video game, what can board games get away with more complexity, and how do you approach this when you change when you make the video game adaptation? And what we talked before, how about the social interaction?
Yes. So in fact. What I wanted to add a little bit more about the Tabletopia thing, because before I answer it, because I find it really magical. During our times, we can do this, and we have these platforms that are, Tabletop Simulator or Tabletopia, whatever, and reach so many people around the world that are really enthusiasts, and that's really powerful. And of course, we would like to play locally with people. We had to get together, have some drinks, and have some fun. But anyway, what I want to say is that reaching people from anywhere in the world, like for instance, I have a gamer that is very enthusiastic in testing Northgard with me, who's coming from Poznan, who is in Poland, So, and from time to time, we just have a game, and then we go through a lot of details, and we discuss, and we have some laughs together, and all this through Tabletopia. So at the end, it's not a big difference, if you just drink your own beer on your table and you don't see the other, but you have another type of experience, And you still interact, you still have fun, you still laugh with them, we still make jokes. So that's interesting point. plus, you get to test, your games, even if they are in the almost final version. You can still do some tweaks in the last moment, and then you test with a lot of people and get some last moment improvements. So really very powerful tool. So the question about the complexity of the video game. Now, if I got it right, there is a different type of experience. When you play alone on a video game, the PC takes over all this complexity behind, does all the calculation for you. You increased, I don't know, with 20%, it will calculate behind the scene. You don't have to really think about all the little details, but you got to really define your strategy at let's say a broader level. And I feel that the dynamic is a little bit different when you play a board game, where you can anticipate more, you can have more control over what you do. You can feel the pace of the game in a different way. You can surprise your opponents with some decisions. You can you look for this interaction. You have all these decision points that are building up your strategy in a little bit different way. But you have less elements, but still you have to keep it interesting. You have to keep all these decisions interesting for you to enjoy the game, to enjoy the challenge of it, to enjoy playing it with your opponents. Now, all this complexity from the video game, of course, you have to abstract. You have to find ways around. Like, for instance, I give you just an example. In this video game, you have this happiness element. So happiness element means that you have tons of parameters that are defining how happy your Vikings are, and depending on this, there is a frequency of these Vikings coming into the being recruited. Now, of course, you can take such decision to implement in your board game a complex board with a lot of scales, where like for instance Through the Ages does, where you have a lot of markers advancing and keeping progress of something like this happiness, and then based on that you will add elements to your board game or not. But I went for a simpler way, where this happiness, this element represents only recruitment. So you just use a special card which is in your deck that you will use more often than not. So you will recruit simply a new member to your clan, and you will follow different cards that come up to during the rounds, that you can improve the way you recruit and such things.
Yeah.
But okay, I don't want to go too much into details. I don't know if I answered to your question or.
Well, yes, you did, but it shows also the complexity you really have to compile while designing games in general. It's not only what the adaptations; it's the whole thing you have to consider, right? The easy to use, but at the same time challenges, the motivation, the social interaction, whatever, the materials, the depiction, the story, the immersion. The list is like.
Yes.
So it would be great if we could, I don't know, I think we need to do a full day workshop together with you and go deep into the details, especially the point with the cards. And as far as I remember, Krzysztof, you also used Wingspan as a card game, right? As video game version. Like, is this one of the main solutions if we think about video game adaptations to the computer and vice versa, Krzysztof?
Well, Wingspan is a card game, but there are also player mats where you play the birds, where you play the cards. So it's a full-fledged board game. But I don't think. Sorry, what's your question? Could you repeat
if you would say that cards are key to simulate digital rules in analog games.
Sorry, I missed you again. I really don't.
Okay, let's rather talk about.
There's plenty of birds, plenty of different cards in the game, and
I mean,
each
but-
of them,
but
most of
Thomas,
them have different rules.
no, sorry, Chris. You are developing local co-op games, which is near to local board and tabletop games, of course. So, what elements of those board games do you incorporate in your game design for your digital games? Or don't you even think of that, Chris?
Okay, so in case of Wingspan, we've just made a straight digital adaptation of the physical game. So it's pretty much one-to-one when it comes to gameplay. We didn't alter any rules besides maybe just making the flow a little bit more, computer and online play friendly. Because in Wingspan you have a lot of situations where instead of just the control moving around the table, there are just people can give a card to a different player or allow another player to draw additional food die, and if you are playing on a 24 hours timer, it can the control can switch to a different person, and then you wait possibly 20 hours for your next move, and their decision is really tiny. They are just taking one card or picking one die. So it doesn't really make sense in a digital format. So where possible and where it doesn't really impact the balance of the game, we have decided to try to make it more straightforward.
Okay, I'd like to talk about one more topic. The chat must have seen this coming all along and must have been waiting for this, and this is storytelling. And Thomas, I'm really interested in what would you say are the main differences of how you tell a story, how you develop characters, how you do such things compared in tabletop games and in video games?
Well, the video games can push things more easily. You can have like maybe voiceover or videos of things like that you don't see, and board game are maybe more environmental in the way they present the story. It's more about the art of the cards, the elements you have on the table. But you have very narrative board games as well. You have games like in many ways, Pandemic Legacy is very narrative driven, but then it's more like the events are going to tell you the story. In general, you have less real estate to tell the story, where if I want, I can do like a half an hour cutscene into a video game to tell you all the stories I want. You don't necessarily have that luxury into a board game. But in board game, you have that maybe like the physical contact of the gameplay elements, the token, the cards, all the things that really kind of like make you into the story. I think I don't know. Maybe there's also like tricks that are similar from one to another, but in terms of medium, there's a lot in common, and a lot of things are also very, very, very different. And I think that's the beauty of each side of this. The case of Reigns is very specific because Reigns is improvised storytelling, which you don't see as much in video games, even though it does exist. That makes it very much more like closer to sitting around the campfire and telling stories to people, right? Which and the cool aspect of that. So yeah, I'm not sure I'm answering the question now. I'm rambling. Sorry.
That's perfectly fine. I think we're slowly getting to an end, but before we do that, I'd like to ask all of you, do you have any final advices for video game and board game designers out there that you just want to give them along their way? Maybe just a brief advice from each of you. Who wants to start? Adrian, maybe.
So it's hard to give advices like this. Definitely, there are different universes, and every you know, the video games, you cannot turn any video games into a board game. Okay, you could force them, but there are video games that are more easily adaptable, let's say. Whereas the other way around, when you have a board game, you can always make it kind of a video interaction. Okay, I shouldn't say always, the word always, because definitely there are board games where the interaction is so key element. People have to do something in the same time and things like this. You cannot really implement them in a video game. But of course, what I want to say is that we will see more and more in the future games that will be in the middle, somewhere in the middle, you know, like having some hybrid form in a way, some elements from a video game, some elements from a board game, sometimes some working with the tablet or whatever. And both universes are interesting. You kind of have different experiences, but as a gamer, you can enjoy one or the other in the same way, I would say. Now, of course, a first-person shooter that likes to do this experience of having adrenaline to look for people around and shoot, of course, you will not make him very happy and giving him a board game where he has to really focus on and then anticipate every move. But of course, there's also exceptions to this. You know, people that like to do that and having some break and having some other experience. So everything is possible. In fact. Okay. Now, what would be the advice? What would be the advice? Is listen to each other. You know, listen to both worlds and find new ways of emerging games. You know, based on both universes that give you even more, you know, a special kind of experience. I don't know, it's kind of broad advice. It's hard to give something very specific. But listen to each other, I think, and, you know, see both ways of playing, both ludical experiences, let's say.
I think that's a very good advice, actually.
It's actually one of the reasons why we are doing this with you now within Games Week Berlin, ProX, which is traditionally a digital gaming conference. So thanks for saying that. You solved our goal. But Thomas and Krzysztof, what's your short advice to the people out there, the fellow designers? Let's start with Thomas.
So my advice for people, especially when you start designing, and that's a lesson I've learned working from people who make tabletop games, even though I've been working with people making video games for years, is that there's a temptation to make things more interesting by making more complex. You're thinking more complex. Actually, the best games tend to be very simple and trying to find solutions to simplify things. And I think this is something you can see also in terms of video games. Sometimes video games try to do too much rather than try to find a nice, simple, elegant solution to what they try to do. Sometimes less is more, and I think that's true for both kind of type of game design.
Okay, Chris.
Well, I can only share a little bit about the digital adaptation side of things, and I would say definitely think twice about the platforms you want to support. There's plenty of digital games adaptations that go only mobile, or go to Steam with direct ports from mobile. And I think by now people are aware that those straight ports from mobile don't really work on Steam and have terrible reviews there. And the reception is because the expectations are so different. But at the same time, I have to admit that I'm in no position to give advice, since we launched Wingspan on one platform so far.
Okay, thanks a lot for your time, the three of you. Thanks a lot for joining us and being with us here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Goodbye. Okay. Actually, I want to ask you the same question, because at Kickstarter you are talking to video game developers and board game developers. And what does you advise them how they should create their campaigns, how they should look like, what's important, what's maybe less important, and what would you say are the main differences in Kickstarter campaigns for board games and video games?
Yeah. Interestingly, they are further apart than you would think, the two industries and the two target groups. That's again one of the reasons why we're doing this now. In Kickstarter in general, it's you're always talking to a niche, a very focused target group. Hence, if you do a tabletop game with, I don't know, where you focus on potential miniatures, then you feature the miniatures most. This is a thing you just can't do in video games. So basically what I want to say is the marketing philosophy is the same. Focus on your USP, focus on your core target group, and then potentially spread out. The target group of tabletop games are found on different platforms than the video game people. So unfortunately, I can't say this rule apply or this advice would apply for both. That said, I do believe that what we are seeing growing more and more is listen to each other, talk to each other, but also license IPs, what we had earlier today. Think about your video game or board game as an IP which you can expand into the other dimension of gaming. That would be my main advice.
Yeah, so I think the big takeaway here is we should listen to each other, video game designers, board game designers, help each other, talk to each other. And this is what this is all about. Micha, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
We'll be back after a short break with Indie Sträuche again and with the next Let's Play of the Dev Booster content. So see you in a few minutes.